The Murder Sheet, a podcast investigating the unsolved murders of Abby Williams and Libby German, provided us a copy of this search warrant, and it reveals new facts about the crime scene where the girls' bodies were found out back on Ronald Logan's Carroll County property on February 14th, 2017.
This is the gate they left down.
2 days after the bodies were discovered, Ron Logan showed us around his property that backs up to Deer Creek and sits at the bottom of the gorge where the Monon High Bridge towers up above, where Libby German and Abby Williams met the man who took their lives.
Okay, there's the crime scene down there. See how the ground's much more matted down right in here? I think you're right there.
The search warrant from March 17th, 2017, recently made public, reveals Libby German shot 43 seconds of video on her cell phone of this man following them on the bridge at approximately 2:13 p.m. on February 13th. And at noon the next day, the girls' bodies were found on Logan's property. There was quite a loss of blood, and the investigators think the killer may have gotten some of that blood on him. An item of clothing was missing from one of the girls, and, quote, it also appeared the girls' bodies were moved and staged, leading investigators to theorize that the killer took a souvenir from the crime scene and maybe took pictures. It looked to investigators like the girls died without putting up a fight. Unknown fibers and hairs were collected from the scene. The search warrant authorized investigators to seize any guns or knives Logan had in his house, take a sample of his blood or bodily fluids, and his cell phone.
This is my backyard. My backyard just happens to be bigger than most people. How many people have a murder committed at their home in their backyard?
The FBI agent who requested this search warrant wrote, quote, I believe there is probable cause to believe that Ronald Logan has committed the crime of murder. The document shows Logan created a false alibi for the time the murders were committed, but he was never charged in the case. Logan was sentenced to 4 years in prison for violating probation in a drunk driving case, and that may be why he lied to investigators. We don't know if the search warrant turned up any evidence specifically related to the Delphi case. Logan died in January. In the newsroom, Russ McQuaid, FOX59 News.
Russ, thank you. And since that day in 2017, investigators have followed many leads, including a fake social media account the girls had contact with. You can read more about that timeline on fox59.com right now. Police are still looking for information to find the person responsible for Abby and Libby's death. Here's that tip line again, 765-822-3535. You can find that and the email tip line at Fox59.
Content warning. This episode gets into topics that some listeners may find very disturbing. It includes details about the murders of 2 young girls, as well as domestic violence. Please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 800-799-7233 if you or someone you know is experiencing abuse.
One question we've gotten over and over again in the last couple of months is, why did law enforcement stop looking at the Kleins? Reading the 2020 police interview transcript we previously released gives the impression that the authorities did a search of the Klein home and polygraphed Kegan Klein in February of 2017, and after that, simply moved on until August of 2020. So what happened? What did they have on another suspect that seemed more convincing than the evidence they amassed against Kegan Klein?
We now have at least a partial answer to that question. We have obtained a crucial document, a court document that gives valuable insight into both the person who law enforcement was looking at in March 2017 and why they were looking at him. It also reveals details about the murders which have never been made public before, until today.
My name is Anya Kane.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee.
And this is the Murder Sheet, a weekly true crime podcast.
Anya and I connected over the Burger Chef murders, a 1978 unsolved case involving the killings of 4 young restaurant employees.
Now we're looking to track restaurant homicides. To help us understand the patterns of these crimes, we created a spreadsheet of nearly 1,000 eatery-related killings, the Murder Sheet. We'll be drawing on that data throughout Season 1 to give you a deep dive into undercovered crimes.
We don't just rely on skimming the headlines. We dive into these cases to bring you in-depth coverage. We're the Murder Sheet, and this is the Delphi Murders, the Ronald Logan search warrant.
Before we go any further, let's quickly recap this complicated case. Liberty German and Abigail Williams were 2 young girls from the city of Delphi in Indiana's Carroll County. On February 13th, 2017, these 2 friends hiked Delphi's forested trails and walked across the abandoned Monon High Bridge. Libby even posted an image of Abby making her way along it. A few minutes later, they ran into someone, a man. Libby recorded at least a portion of the encounter, but only a few moments of it have been released. The man calls them guys and tells them to go down the hill.
Guys. Downhill. Guys. Downhill. Guys. Downhill.
We don't know exactly what happened next, but we do know that the next day, Libby and Abby were found murdered. Their bodies were discovered on property belonging to Ronald Logan, who was then 77 years old. Police began to suspect Logan himself of being involved in the killings, and in March 2017, roughly a month after the raid on the Klein home, law enforcement conducted a search of Logan's property, hoping to find evidence that would tie him to the murders.
Today, we are going to read to you from the probable cause affidavit that law enforcement filed to secure that warrant. And we are also going to share the warrant itself.
After speaking with law enforcement, we redacted some information from the warrant.
Once we're done redacting the names of the innocent from those documents, we will share them in our Facebook discussion group. The probable cause affidavit offers us a glimpse inside the investigation at the time. It is this document the law enforcement must file in order to convince a judge they have good reason to believe the particular items related to a crime may be found at a specified location. In essence, it is where law enforcement needs to make a bit of a case about whichever person is connected to the property. So, in this document, they will offer a case against Ronald Logan.
In the years since 2017, many online commentators have indicated they do not believe Logan committed these crimes. Observers who fall into this category have even made references to the fact that Indiana State Police have cleared Logan of suspicion in these crimes. The basis for that claim appears to be a tweet sent out on the official Indiana State Police Twitter account at 8:39 p.m. on March 14, 2017. That tweet references David Burston, a public information officer with the ISP. It says,
D. Burston says media reports connecting Ronald Logan to Delphi murders is false. Probation violation. No connection to murder investigation.
That language seems very clear and unequivocal. Media reports tying Ronald Logan to the murders are false. But there is a problem. That tweet, which seemed to clear Logan, was, as we have said, sent on March 14th, 2017. The probable cause affidavit suggesting Logan was involved with the killings was filed on March 17th, 2017, 3 days later. And it reflects investigative information that was being gathered days before the tweet was sent.
In short, at the time ISP sent out this tweet indicating that law enforcement did not believe Logan was connected to the murders, Logan was in fact being investigated for being possibly connected to these murders. At the very least, then, the March 14, 2017 tweet seems to have been deliberately misleading. But, of course, it was far from the last time the ISP has put out confusing or misleading information about this case.
We are now going to start reading from the March 17th, 2017 probable cause affidavit. At times, we will stop our reading to offer our thoughts on the material. Whenever we switch from the affidavit to our analysis, or vice versa, you will hear this. We will now start the affidavit.
Keep in mind that as we did in the previous documents we released, we will be removing certain names and identifying information. Nicole Robertson swears or affirms that she believes, and has good cause to believe, evidence of a homicide is located in the residence of Ronald Logan, which is described as a white 2-story single-family dwelling, including the detached garage, outbuildings, or a white Ford F-250 VIN 1FTNX21 L54EB25946 states as follows. I, Nicole Robertson, am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and have been employed as such for 12 years. Prior to her employment as an FBI agent, Nicole Robertson was employed as a Sauk Village, Illinois police officer for approximately 6 years. Nicole Robertson is assigned to the Merrillville Resident Agency and currently participates in the investigation of all violent crimes.
We find it interesting that this warrant was prepared by an FBI agent. Let's return for a brief moment to the day of the raid on the Klein residence. After that search, FBI agent Bob Ramsey told the Journal and Courier that we in no way believe that the resident of the Canal Street home was connected to the murder of those girls. Now, a few weeks later, we have another FBI agent appearing to suggest that the actual perpetrator was Ronald Logan. Was the FBI responsible for the pivot from the Kleins to Ronald Logan? In any case, the warrant now proceeds to describe the murders.
Background. 1. On February 13, 2017, at approximately 1 p.m., juvenile victims, hereafter referred to as LG and AW, were taken to the Monon High Bridge Trail, located in Delphi, Indiana. LG and AW were walking the trail in the area of County Road 300 North and 575 West, near latitude 40, 35 degrees, 21.4 degrees, longitude 86, 38 degrees, 23.3 degrees, at approximately 2:13 p.m., which was the time of last contact with LG and AW by cellular device. The victims were to be picked up by a family member at 3 p.m., and the victims never met with the family member. Approximately 5:30 p.m. was the last successful ping of the cellular phone by AT&T. The victims LG and AW were located deceased on February 14, 2017, at approximately 12:17 p.m. at the above-listed latitude and longitude, having been the victims of murder in accordance with Indiana Code 354211.
2. A suspect has been developed of a white male wearing a blue jacket with a heavy physical build, wearing a cap and blue jeans. The development of this suspect was made by a 43-second video taken on LG's phone, where the suspect follows the victims as they are walking on the Monon High Bridge Trail. Near the end of the video, the suspect speaks to the victims, saying, "Down the hill." It sounds as though he is directing the victims to leave the trail they were on and enter the wooded area below. No person has come forward and identified himself as the person who met the victims and made the statement in LG's video. Therefore, it is believed that the person in LG's video participated in the killings. Images of the suspect have been broadcast on the news media since February 15, 2017, as a person of interest.
3. LG and AW are presumed to have made contact with the unknown male at approximately 2:13 p.m., based upon analysis of LG's cell phone, which recorded the video.
4. On February 14, 2017, at approximately 12:17 p.m., victims LG and AW were found dead with wounds caused by a weapon on the property owned by Ronald Logan. A large amount of blood was lost by the victims at the crime scene. Because of the nature of the victim's wounds, it is nearly certain the perpetrator of the crime would have gotten blood on his person/clothing. The location of the crime scene is approximately 1,400 feet from Logan's residence.
Now we come to the part of the affidavit with the author, Special Agent of the FBI Nicole Robertson, explains why she specifically believes Ronald Logan is tied to the murders.
5. Logan is a 77-year-old male. Logan's physical build is consistent with that of the male suspect videoed by LG on the Monon High Bridge Trail. Logan owns farmland and cares for large farm animals. Logan appears to be in good physical condition. Logan has been interviewed several times. His voice is not inconsistent with that of the person in the video.
The author of the affidavit now turns to detailing information about the crime scene itself, and in doing so, she reveals more information that has not previously been released to the public.
6. It was also discovered that articles of clothing of one of the victims were missing from the crime scene, while the rest of their clothing was recovered. It also appeared the girls' bodies were moved and staged. Based upon my training and experience, it is common for perpetrators of this type of crime to take a souvenir, or in some fashion, memorialize the crime scene, whether by photos or electronic or digital methods that are then downloaded onto computers, storage devices, tablets, phones, iPad devices, or other electronic devices that store digital data for later viewing, scanning, or copying.
7. LG and AW had no visible signs of a struggle or fight. 8. During the processing of the crime scene, investigators located unknown fibers and unidentified hairs, which may later be used for comparison of similar fibers or hairs.
There is much to digest here. The killer may have taken articles of clothing from one of the victims. That could point to a sexual motivation behind the killings. It could also be an attempt at misdirection, or perhaps the articles of clothing were simply lost. We also want to note this line. It also appeared the girls' bodies were moved and staged. What does this mean? It is important to stress that this does not have to mean that the bodies were moved a great distance. Perhaps they were only moved in a minimal fashion in order to carry out the staging. We obviously don't know how the bodies were staged, but generally, when victims' corpses are staged, it means that the killer is trying to make it look like the crime was something it was not. For instance, someone may try to make a murder look like a suicide. Or the staging could point to something even more sinister. On April 22nd, 2019, investigators from the Indiana State Police, the FBI, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, and the Delphi Police organized a press conference where they unveiled a new sketch. During that event, ISP Superintendent Doug Carter said, "To the murderer, I believe you have just a little bit of conscience left. I can assure you that how you left them in those woods is not what they are experiencing today." That could point to post-mortem staging done with the intent to humiliate or degrade the victims, or upset the first responders who came upon their bodies. Again, we do not know how these bodies were staged or what the intent of that staging was. All we can say is that the staging, whatever it was, clearly did not fool investigators. They recognized it for what it was.
But, again, the intent of this affidavit is not to reveal details about the crime scene. The purpose instead is to connect Ronald Logan to this crime, and to establish the need for a search of his property. So we now come back to the subject of Logan. But we note that we will be removing the names of the people mentioned in this document.
9. Logan owns numerous weapons, including handguns and knives that were observed by LEOs during the execution of a search warrant that took place at his home on March 6, 2017. Logan's home was searched as a result of a probation violation. The search was limited to the discovery of firearms and included only his main residence.
10. On February 14, 2017, at approximately 9:20 a.m., Logan contacted man number 1. Logan asked man number 1 to tell the police that man number 1 came to Logan's home between 2 p.m. and 2:30 p.m. on February 13, 2017, to pick Logan up. Logan further told man number 1 to say that man number 1 drove Logan to an aquarium store in Lafayette, Indiana. Logan told man number 1 to say they returned home to Logan's house between 5 p.m. and 5:30 p.m.
11. On February 14, 2017, while requesting consent to search Logan's property, a law enforcement officer, LEO, advised Logan that LEOs would not search his home unless evidence led LEOs to Logan's house. In that meeting, Logan told the LEO that he did not think evidence would lead them to that, but said, "I don't know."
12. A receipt from Aquarium World in Lafayette, dated February 13, 2017, with a checkout time of 5:21 p.m., was found in Logan's home on March 6, 2017, during a probation violation search. Logan resides approximately 22 miles from the store. It would take approximately 30 minutes to get to the store from Logan's home.
13. On March 6, 2017, during an interview with an LEO, Logan said he was picked up by man number 1 around 3 p.m. and taken straight to the aquarium store in Lafayette. In the March 6, 2017 interview, Logan said after he was done at the aquarium store, he was driven straight home. These statements were found to be factually false and intentionally designed to deceive LEOs.
14. On March 7, 2017, man number 1 was interviewed by a LEO. Man number 1 told the LEO that he was with Logan on Monday, February 13, 2017, and that man number 1 drove Logan to the aquarium store in Lafayette. On March 9, 2017, man number 1 was interviewed by another LEO regarding the trip to the aquarium. Man number 1 told the LEO that he had lied when he was interviewed by the LEO on March 7, 2017, at Logan's request. Man number 1 explained that Logan had never asked man number 1 to lie for him in the past. Man number 1 knows that Logan has driven his vehicle while on probation, is prohibited from doing so. Man number 1 also said that Logan did not ask him to lie for Logan when Logan drove to the transfer station earlier in the day.
15. On March 12, 2017, man number 1 explained in an interview to an LEO that Logan called him on the morning of February 14, 2017, and asked him to provide the alibi for Logan's drive to the aquarium in Lafayette. This phone call was made prior to LEO's discovery of LG and AW's deceased bodies. Based on investigators' experience, it is reasonable to believe that the creation of an alibi prior to the discovery of a crime indicates culpability or knowledge of the crime.
This seems to be a key point for Special Agent Nicole Robertson. Logan asked for an alibi before the crime was even discovered. Clearly a sign of guilt. But there is a complicating factor here. First of all, even though the bodies of the girls had not yet been discovered, police were still going around asking all sorts of questions about where people were the day before and what they'd been doing. And whether or not Logan was involved with the murders, we do know for a fact that he did have a secret, something he very much wanted to hide. He had driven himself to that aquarium store, and that was a violation of his probation. And, of course, this is exactly what Logan asked man number 1 to lie about. Logan wanted the man to claim that he drove Logan there, instead of Logan driving himself to the store.
16. Man number 1 said he thought the photograph of the male that was released by the media of the man on the bridge looked like Logan. 17. LEOs learned that Logan had driven on February 13, 2017, to the transfer station in Delphi, Indiana, to drop off trash. Video from the transfer station shows Logan driving his white Ford pickup truck between 11:27 a.m. and 11:32 a.m. The video from the transfer station appears to be off by 26 minutes, putting Logan at the transfer station from approximately 11:53 a.m. and 11:58 a.m.
18. Logan did not ask man number 1 to provide an alibi for his drive to the transfer station on February 13, 2017. Logan only asked man number 1 to provide an alibi for a trip that would have occurred at the time of the apparent abduction of LG and AW.
It is worth noting that investigators at this time were not asking about where people were hours before the girls went missing. The area of their primary concern was the afternoon, which was when Libby and Abby were abducted. Let's point out something else as well. According to the best information we have at this time, the abduction took place shortly after 2:13 p.m. Logan told police that man number 1 picked him up at 3 p.m. If Logan was the killer, he would presumably have known that he would have needed an alibi for 2:13 p.m. and not 3 p.m. Is something stopping you from being happy and achieving all of your dreams?
If so, maybe you've thought about speaking with a therapist and getting some help, but it can be difficult to find a licensed therapist you can afford.
We suggest that our listeners in that situation check out betterhelp.com/murdersheet.
Now, BetterHelp is not a crisis line or self-help. It is real professional counseling done securely online.
You'll get timely and thoughtful responses to all of your questions, and you can also schedule weekly video or phone sessions.
And with these days of inflation, everyone has to be concerned about cost. Using BetterHelp is more affordable than traditional offline counseling.
As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting our sponsor, BetterHelp, That's help with a P at betterhelp.com/murdersheet. At this point, FBI agent Robertson tries to suggest that Logan seems to have been the sort of person